Hi everyone, Rogue Reader here with another first reading review, this time of the very anticipated, at least for me, Master of Evil novel by Adam Christopher. This novel released recently, and I'm going to be keeping things spoiler-free. This is just kind of my thoughts on it in general, as I do with all of these first reading reviews. So really, the only things I'm going to be talking about plot-wise are just kind of be the general setup of the novel. That being said, I do have a lot of thoughts on this, so I actually am going to have a spoiler section at the very end, and I'm going to talk about a few key story points that I wanted to mention. But that'll be at the very end. In the meantime, this author, I wanted to mention, he has written Shadow of the Sith. Essentially, it was a sequel trilogy novel that explains and tells the story of Rey's parents. It was a really good tie-in novel. I remember enjoying it quite well, and I thought it filled in a lot of good gaps. But let's just jump into this one. So for the setup, this book takes place immediately after Revenge of the Sith. It actually takes place in a very specific point. There are the Darth Vader Marvel comics. There was a run that covered Darth Vader immediately after Revenge of the Sith as well, like literally the scene where he rises from the table and it just continues from there. This book takes place during that same period. So there's a plot in the comic where Darth Vader has to kill a Jedi, steal his crystal, and bleed the Kyber crystal so he can make his lightsaber, his red Sith saber. This takes place immediately after doing that, and it actually overlaps a little bit in the very beginning of the book with the comic when he is first making that saber. So there's a little bit of overlap from there, and then the book kind of continues on into its own plot. Now, aside from Vader, the real main character, I would say, of this book is going to be, his name is Goth, and he is the head of the Royal Guard for Palpatine. And he has his own personal quest. He has an incurable disease. He is going to die from it, and he's trying to find out his own way of curing that disease so he can keep living on. And essentially, he gets an assignment that he needs to go with Darth Vader, who is not quite seems to be trusted yet, and it's unsure what his role in the Empire is going to be, and he kind of has to spy on him for Palpatine. So he's kind of thrust into this assignment, but he has his own personal goals as well. And going along with him is his droid TC-99, who is also another major character in the book, and I'll talk about in just a little bit. So first I want to talk about my feelings on the plot. And I do have mixed feelings on the plot. My thoughts are kind of swirling all over the place when it comes to this novel. So I wouldn't say this isn't really a novel about Darth Vader. It's more about how others perceive him. Goth I would say he's the actual main character of this book. And a lot of your experiences with Vader are through him and how Goth perceives him when he's in his presence. The same thing for other characters that'll start to come up. You'll see how they perceive Vader whenever they're with him or they're thinking of him or afraid of him. It's all through other characters. It's not really through Vader himself, except for a couple key moments in the end and in the intro where they do cover the kind of time span that overlaps with the comic. Otherwise, you're not really seeing Vader unless it's through someone else's eyes. So what that means is this is really a story about the character Goth, the Royal Guard captain, and to find a cure for his incurable disease, and how he ends up getting caught up in this quest with Vader. The storylines do overlap, but this is about Goth and his personal quest. It feels more like Goth's story than it does Vader's, I will say. But I actually want to talk more about the plot. I want to get back to the plot towards the end. I want to switch to the characters next. I do want to say this feels more like Goth's story than Vader's, but I want to get back to that. Hold that thought. I want to get back to the plot a bit more towards the end and kind of further explain, but I want to get to the characters first because I think that's going to more lead into my thoughts about this all. Starting off with Goth, he is a good character. I do enjoy him. He feels developed, and the quest he's on to essentially find a cure for his disease, it puts stakes in the game for him, and it gives a sense of urgency whenever you're reading about him. It's interesting to see his perspective and how he's a true believer in the Empire. He's a loyalist through and through. He believes what the Empire is doing is good, and it is interesting to see him and his place when compared to Vader, and how Vader is kind of this unknown at this time period, and he's not quite sure how he feels about him or what Vader really is about. I do wish he had a little bit more badass moments when it came to the book. As the head of the Royal Guard, I was kind of expecting him to have some bigger fight scenes and maybe really show off his skills that would be indicative of that position he has, but that doesn't really happen per se. So I guess I do wish that he got a little bit, just a standout, badass action scene would have been nice to see of him. Now, I know I said he was a loyalist, but he does break some rules, and that comes specifically to his droid, which he's illegally modified, TC-99. TC-99 is definitely my favorite character in the book. Disney writers, authors, I don't know how they do it, but they keep finding ways to make new droid characters interesting, and TC-99 is no exception. He's been modified by Goths. He has a personality. He specifically has like programming removed that would kind of limit that. So he has a distinct personality. He is his own being. And on top of that, he kind of has a modification that allows him to load memory cards of other droids and gain their knowledge and experience. So he essentially has these tapes he can load into himself for any skill set he might need at a moment. And that can lead to some unexpected situations later in the book. I really like the two of them together, Goth and TC-99. They feel like true friends, and it's always nice seeing them together in any scenes they have. Let's talk about Vader next, who is the one you would expect to kind of be the central figure of this whole thing. He's done well, and the things you would assume to see, you're going to see from him. So there's moments where he is threatening and terrifying to others. You're going to see that. There's moments where he is struggling with his past, and his past identity is Anakin. And there's even a couple of surprising moments. I specifically like some clones get involved kind of towards the end of the book, and we get to see how Vader acts with the clones. And I think that was actually my favorite perspective, because here's Anakin just coming out of the Clone Wars and has been working with these clones for years, and he has respect for them and he cares for them. And a part of that still carries over into Vader. So he actually shows some, I guess you could call it kindness. He's still a Dark Lord of the Sith, but he still respects the clones and will help them out. And I actually liked seeing that perspective of him. There are other characters that come up, including a villain, but they don't really show up till later in the book. I would say towards like kind of the third act. So I don't really, because they're not there from the beginning, I don't want to bring them up right now. But there are other characters that come up too. All right, let's talk about how it's written. There's two main aspects here that I want to talk about when it comes to how it's written. When it comes to the actual writing itself, it's written well. No complaints there. It's written clearly. I can follow it clearly. It's written well. But when it comes to the structure of the book, I think that's a different topic. So I have some thoughts about the structure. It's, as I said, it's from Goth's perspective, but towards I would say around the third act of the book, other characters start coming in that it starts switching to their perspectives. And that just felt a little strange to me. I thought maybe it should either stay with Goth the whole time, and if you're going to have these other characters come up, maybe they should have an introduction a little bit earlier. So that just felt a little off to me. That might just purely be me. I don't think I've read a book that does that before, where we start introducing other characters and their perspectives so late in the novel itself. So that just kind of felt odd to me. For Vader himself, as I mentioned, it's mainly how other people view him, but then you will have times that it does switch to his perspective. So again, in the very beginning, and then there's some key moments in the end where suddenly we are in Vader's mind and we're seeing how he sees things. And for that to just kind of come up in the middle of things after the book has mainly been how other people perceive him, and then other characters are coming in towards the end, it just feels a little strange and disjointed to me. So I can't really say that's a negative. It was just kind of a weird feeling I had when I was reading the book itself. I also want to talk about how the book opens. So this isn't really a spoiler, because this is literally how the book opens, but the book actually opens with Count Dooku's perspective. And he's essentially dealing with the MacGuffin, I guess you could say, that Vader and Goth are going to go on a quest to find later. But we see Count Dooku interact with it first in the beginning of the book. And I kind of wish the author didn't do this, because it means that we as the reader have some knowledge of what they're going after before the characters themselves do. So when they're discovering it, there are moments where it's not as surprising, because we already know what it is, because we saw Count Dooku deal with it in the beginning of the book. Now, there are still other aspects to it that will come up later that are a surprise, but the thing itself is not a surprise for the reader. So I kind of wonder if the novel may have been better if that was kind of cut out and we got to discover it fully when the characters discover it themselves. All right, so I kind of want to go back now and I want to talk about the plot and some of my issues with it, because that's really where my dislikes for this novel are coming from. First, I need to talk about, I guess, my expectations. You know, I usually don't research books when I hear they're being announced too much. I might see the opening blurb of like what this book is about, but otherwise I like to go in blind. But hearing that there's a Revenge of the Sith kind of sequel novel about Darth Vader, my expectations were that this was going to be a book about him and from his perspective. Now, it turns out it's not. It's from other characters' perspectives of him. And that's fine. I'm on board with that idea. But I feel like it doesn't go enough either way for that. There are plenty of times in this book where Goth, who I would say is the main character, he's not with Vader, so it's not 100% you're getting his perspective of him. Goth is doing his own thing a lot of the time too. So I think it's kind of unfair to purely say that this book is about Vader through others' eyes. I would say that happens, but it's not really what the book is about. Now, maybe that's my fault. I shouldn't have been expecting that. And, you know, you could say, as a longtime Star Wars reader, in my mind, I was thinking, you know, about comparing this to The Rise of Darth Vader, which was the Legends Darth Vader novel that also takes place immediately after Revenge of the Sith. That's a novel I actually enjoy quite a bit. And that's unfair of me to compare it, but when you have Master of Evil, and I went back and I looked at some of the announcements for this novel, and the announcements do state this is a story about Darth Vader seeking to conquer death. And yeah, I mean, the assignment Palpatine sends him on is reflective of that. But again, to me, that just gives the impression that this is a Darth Vader novel, and I don't think I can call this a Darth Vader novel, not fully. This is a novel about an Imperial guard who gets caught up with Darth Vader with his own plot. I think the advertising is a little misleading on that. Now, you know, if you had a royal guard on the cover with Vader in the background, I think that would be more reflective of what to expect with this book, but that probably wouldn't sell as much either. That probably wouldn't sound as interesting, so I can understand that aspect too. Speaking of the cover, the image on the cover, you do get that Darth Vader and his mask is kind of scary looking there. That scene does happen in the book, so that's not a misdirect or anything. That does happen. But again, I wouldn't call this a purely Vader novel. Now, again, we do get some key scenes with Vader towards the end, and it is from his perspective. So let's talk about that a little bit. Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but my main issue with that is that I feel like a lot of Vader stories cover similar ground. I feel like they cover a lot of the same themes, and it's about Vader being conflicted with who he was in his past as Anakin. I don't think this book does anything new in that regard. I think it covers areas that we've seen done in other stories, and it's not bad. It's not done badly, but I think the other stories might do it better. So that's another issue I kind of have with this book. I don't think it really breaks new ground. I didn't find it to break new ground. Now, maybe if you're someone that only reads the novels and you don't explore like any of the games or comics or things like that, you probably won't have an issue here. This will probably be refreshing. But as I think a lot of niche Star Wars fans, and again, those are niche fans, so I can't say that's everyone, and I'm not going to say, but for people like me that do consume other Star Wars media, it felt kind of the reveals they have feel kind of redundant when it comes to Darth Vader, I will say. And by the end, I don't really get the sense that he's become the master of evil. I don't get, when Obi-Wan says you've become a master of evil, that implies that he's really changed from who he was. And I don't really get the sense that that there's this major shift in him that we haven't seen already. So again, I don't get that sense either when it comes to this book, but that kind of encompasses my issues with the novel itself. Let's talk about the things I like about the book, because there are a lot of things I like about it. Goth and TC, as the main characters, are good main characters. I enjoy them. I enjoy seeing them together. I'm invested in Goth's story. When it comes to them, it works really well. As I mentioned earlier, my favorite perspective is the perspective of the clone characters that come in later and how they see Vader. Those are some of my favorite interactions involving Vader in the book. And despite my complaints about maybe some of the reveals in the end feeling not too surprising, the third act in general is really great. As all the plot elements being set up are coming together, it's exciting and it works really well. So I enjoyed that too. As I mentioned, I do want to talk spoilers, but before I get to that, I just want to say, is this a novel I recommend? And that's really going to be based on what your expectations are of this. Are you expecting a Darth Vader-centric novel after Revenge of the Sith? You're not going to really get that. You're not going to get that here fully. There are aspects, yes, that is a part of this book, but it's not fully a part of this book. And if that's what you were expecting, that's not necessarily what this is 100%. If you're interested in getting some insight into Vader and his character and how he transitions from Anakin to Vader, if you're someone that only reads the novels, I think you will like this. I think you'll get something out of this. But if you're someone who has experienced other Vader stories, Vader comics, and things like that, it's not going to be anything surprising. It's going to be stuff you've seen before. And ultimately, if the idea of a man who's trying to figure out a way to cure his incurable disease before he dies, and he has this great friendship with a droid he's programmed, and he gets caught up in this quest he ends up getting entangled with this quest for Vader that could help solve his goals. And if that sounds interesting to you, which, I did find that aspect of the book interesting, then yeah, you'll like this book. But I think that should be the expectation you have going into it. All right, this is going to be the spoiler section. So I'm now going to talk about the key points about the ending here, and other Vader stories. So this is your last warning. If you haven't read the book yet, you can stop the video here and you can come back later. So what happens in the end of this book is Vader kind of is in this vision with this Force artifact, and he's confronting, he has this lightsaber duel with himself as Anakin, and he hears like Shmi's voice, and he ends up seeing Padme, and he wants to, he wants Palpatine to keep his promise and help him learn to cheat death, and he wants to figure out a way to bring Padme back to life. He's not going to get it with this artifact, and so there's this moment where he stabs and he kills Padme in the vision, and it's to me, this was a moment that was Vader letting go of his past and embracing who he is. That's gone, and now he is fully Darth Vader. That's kind of the key scene. In an interview with the author, which I watched Star Wars Explain's interview with him, he talks about how it's kind of similar to Rogue One, where the whole story is kind of the setup for the big Vader payoff, and this is kind of that payoff. But for me, this doesn't work because we've seen this before a couple of times now. It seems to be a theme common with Vader stories. So the Vader Marvel comics, there's two different ones. There's ones that run after, A New Hope, and there's ones that are right after Revenge of the Sith. The Revenge of the Sith ones deal with this. He creates his temple on Mustafar because it's this nexus of the Force, and he's able to kind of go into this nexus. I would almost say it's probably the world between worlds. I don't know what it is, but he goes into it with the hope of finding Padme and he's under the impression he can bring her back to life from that. And through that, he encompasses all this visions. It's a very similar experience. And then there's the Star Wars VR game, which I haven't played it, but I've heard of the story of it, and apparently that's a very similar story. It's him on Mustafar trying to figure out a way to bring Padme back to life. The Vader comics after A New Hope deal with this. He revisits, the Lars homestead, and he has these memories of, when he visited back in Attack of the Clones. I think he does that twice. At one point, he fights the handmaidens of Padme attack him, and he's surrounded by all these Padmes that are older, and he ends up recruiting them. He ends up creating a unit of Padmes, essentially. So, the theme of him not letting go is there. And you can even argue aspects of the Ahsoka show where she fights, Anakin, played by Hayden Christensen. And all of these are things that we have seen before. And to me, I think some of those stories do it better here. And it didn't feel like the great revelation I was expecting because, yeah, I've seen him struggle with this before. The author in the interview talks about how this is the first time Vader is trying to bring back Padme, and he is going to do it again. But that's not the sense I got from reading the book itself. The sense I got from the book itself, and maybe I was wrong, I got the sense that this was Vader moving on from wanting to bring back Padme. When he kills her, the vision of her in the novel, to me, that was him letting go. But he doesn't let go because he keeps trying again and again. So again, these are all things we've seen before. So that's kind of my little rant on all of that. I think it's just kind of, it's redundant and it's things we've seen before. I think the other stories do it better. That sounds really harsh and critical. This isn't a bad book. I wanna say that off the bat. This isn't a bad book. It just covers. I just think it covers ground that's already been covered before, and maybe I'm hoping for something new when it comes to Darth Vader. I might just personally be tired, even though I love those other stories. I might just personally be tired of seeing that same theme come up again and again. But that's just me. But again, let me know what you thought when it came to Master of Evil by Adam Christopher. This has been Rogue Reader, and may the Force be with you.